Hello everyone and welcome back to another Blender Made Easy tutorial. Today we're going to be creating a low poly pumpkin patch scene. So to do this we're going to delete the cube and then add in a icosphere. So press X, delete it, then press Shift A, we're going to go to Mesh and then icosphere. This icosphere we can leave it at the default subdivision levels and the size and whatnot. What we're going to do is go into edit mode by pressing tab. We're going to right click on the top right here on this top vertex and we're going to bring it down. So what you want to do is go into front view and then press 5 to go into orthographic view. Now if we press the O key, that will enable proportional editing, and we can see down here it turns it on to enabled. We can leave the fall off at smooth, that's perfectly fine. Then you're going to want to press G, Z to lock it to the Z axis, and then just drag it down probably around here. Let's press Z so we can see it a little bit better. Something like this. Let's go up and check. Alright, that looks good. Then go into front view again by pressing 1. Go into edit mode. We'll right click on this bottom vertex and then press G, Z and drag it up till it's about there. There we go. So now we have this sort of shape. And what we can do is just kind of right click on this vertex, maybe bring it up, bring that side down, just give it some variation so it's not completely even. I think that's good. Maybe this side a little bit lower. Then go into face select mode, and you can do that by coming down here and clicking on the face select mode. We're going to right click on all of these faces. So press shift, holding right click, just go like that. Then press E, right click, scale, make sure proportional editing is off, so press O to disable it. Then scale it inwards till it's like right about here, and then we're going to extrude it up. So this is going to be like the stem. We also want to drag this a little bit lower. I think that's good right there. So go into front view, press E to extrude, then scale, rotate, E to extrude, scale, and then one more probably right there, and G, move it into place. So there we go, that's looking pretty good. It's a little thick, so I'll go into edit mode, I'll alt right click, scale that inwards, alt right click, scale that one, and lastly this one right there. There we go. And it's a little tall as well, so what I'll do is I'll box select all of these and just drag them down. Perfect. So there we go. We have our low poly pumpkin, and what we can do now is create the face. But before you do that, I want to right click on it, press Shift D, and then right click M and move it to layer 2. We're going to be using that pumpkin a little bit later to create like a particle system for the pumpkins to be spread out all over the scene. So now right click on this one, go into edit mode, and then we can start creating the face. So for the eyes, I'm just going to right click on this face, press I to inset, probably right around there. We'll rotate it, give it some variation, maybe drag it this way a little bit, then press X and delete the face. So there we go, we got one eye. We can do the same thing over here, maybe a little bit different, so I might inset it, keep it a little bit bigger, rotate it this way a little bit, X, delete that face. So it gives it some variations. We have a smaller eye and then we have a bigger eye. For the nose, I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to press K, that brings up the knife tool. And what we can do with this tool is create our own faces. So we can just like click on this line right here, and that will add like a vertex, and wherever the green dots are, that is where a vertex will be added. So we'll go like something like this, maybe drag it down this way, kind of up, and give it some just randomness, something like that. And once you're done, once you've connected it, you can press the enter key and that will create the face. Then holding down shift, I'm going to right click on all of these faces right here, press X and delete them. So there we go, we got the nose. And now for the mouth, this you can do whatever you want with it. It is a little bit tricky to get it just right, but try to follow along. So I'm going to go probably in the middle of this face. So I'll click right here, I'll drag it down, kind of up, down, just sort of like this, going back and forth to give it some like variation, something like this, maybe up a little bit, maybe this way, kind of up this, and just kind of back and forth. And what I'm doing here is I'm kind of aligning wherever I click to down here. So you can see these two are aligned. This one is kind of aligned with this one, and this one's a little bit in line with that one. So it's something similar to that, and then I'll click right there. Once you're done, press enter, and that will create the face. Then we can right click on all of these faces, holding down the shift key, right there, and X, faces. And there we go, so we created that, awesome. But if we come up close, you can see that it's completely flat. So we're going to go to the modifier tab and add a solidify modifier. So click add modifier and go to solidify. We'll drag the thickness up till it's about the size of a pumpkin would be, probably around there, maybe a little bit thicker. I think that's good. Probably around like 0.125. There we go. All right, so let's press Shift Z to see how this looks. It's not too bad. Let's add a light source in the middle of it. So press Shift A, we're gonna go to lamp and then point lamp. Let's see how this looks just with the default settings of the point lamp. Shift Z. It's very, very bright. So let's go to the object data panel and change the strength to a value of 40. Maybe a little bit less, let's try 20. All right, 20 is good. And then you can change the color to like an orange yellowish kind of color somewhere around here. There we go. So you can kind of imagine like a candle inside there. That's looking pretty good. Let's right click on our pumpkin and we'll give it a diffuse material of like an orange color. So probably around here. Let's press Shift Z, see how this looks. Probably a little less, maybe more of this color. Not too bad. And it looks like the lamp inside it is now a little bit red, which I don't really want. So I'll kind of drag it this way a little bit. Give it some more of a yellowish color. That's a little bit better. All right, there we go. So we have our pumpkin. Now we can create the plane and start adding the particle system. So go to layer 2, then right click on this one, give it the same material that we just had. So click on this little button right here and select material 001. There we go. And I'll also move it to layer 5. I don't want it to be like in the scene. I just want it to be out of the way. Then go back to layer 1. I'm going to press Z, box select everything in your scene, just like that, box select it, then press M and move it to layer 2. So layer 1 is going to be where the plane is, layer 2 will be the pumpkin, and then also the lantern. And I'll show you guys that in just a little bit. So go to layer 1, press Shift A, we're going to go to mesh and then plane. Scale this plane up right about the size of the grid or so, probably around there. Then press tab to go into edit mode, W, and subdivide this. We're going to do this a couple of times till it's about the subdivision that we want. That is probably good right there. Next, go over to the modifier tab, click add modifier and displacement. Then press Ctrl A and apply the scale. That's really important. If you don't do this, the proportions of the displacement will be a little bit off. So whenever you scale up something, always make sure to press Ctrl A and apply the scale. Click new on the texture, then go over to the texture panel and change it from image or movie to clouds. This will give it some displacement. The strength is a little bit strong, so I'll drag it down till it's a value of like 0.5 or so. One more modifier that we're going to be adding to this plane is a triangulate. This will just triangulate the faces, and I think this looks a little bit better with low poly if the faces are triagonal. So once you've done that, we're now ready to add in the pumpkins. So go over to the particle system and click new. Change the type from emitter to hair. Then check on advanced and scroll down to the object button right here. Click on object and select icosphere 001. But we can see the particles are all facing the wrong way. They're all rotated and it looks just really, really bad. So first off, let's bring up the size a little bit, probably around here. Give it some random size, so some of the pumpkins are smaller, some of them are bigger. That looks good. Check on rotation and then change this to, let's try global Y. There we go, so we can see that it's now working. I want the stem to be a little bit inside the ground, so what I'll do is I'll change it to global Z, no, global X maybe, or object X. I think that's fine. We'll give it some random, so some of them are rotated. We'll change the random over here, and then the phase will kind of rotate it this way a little bit. There we go. And there's way, way too many. So let's scroll up and change the number to 200. Maybe even less than that, we'll see. All right, that looks good. And now we need to set up the camera view. So go into front view, then press Ctrl-Alt-0. That will snap the camera into place. Right click on it, just right click on the side right here. Press G, Z, and drag it up. And then move it in just a little bit. Okay, so what we want to do now is get rid of all of the pumpkins that are on the outside of the camera. So to do this, we're going to right click on the plane, then go over to the object mode and change it to weight paint. So now we're in the weight paint mode. Next, go into top view by pressing 7. click on gradient right here and drag from the bottom all the way to the top, just like this. It's a little bit less, so I'll zoom out and I'll do that one more time so there's more red. There we go. So right around there. So we have some green at the top and red at the bottom. What this does with the particle system, where the red is will be where the most particles are, where the orange is a little bit less, and the green a little bit less. So it's a gradient effect of the particles. Next, go into camera view, then press Z to go into wireframe. Change the weight to 0, then bring your brush size up a little bit by pressing F, and then start painting. So just get rid of all the red that is on the outside of the camera, because we don't need any particles to be on the outside, so I'll just get rid of all of them. So just like this, kind of paint this way, get rid of all of the color. Over on this side as well, just paint just like that. So let's go into top view, make sure everything's good. Perfect. Okay, so now we are done with the weight paint mode. We can go back to object. So click on object mode, then scroll down to the vertex groups in the particle system. Select the group that we just made. So the density, select group. And now we can see that all of the pumpkins are now inside this group and there's none on the outside. You can see it's completely empty. It's exactly what I want. And now it looks like there is a little too many particles, so I'll change the number to 150. I'll give it a random seed till I find which one I like. I think that one's pretty cool, so I'll leave it at 2. Next, let's add in our other pumpkin. So press Shift 2 to add in the other layer. Then press Z. I'll right click on this. Make sure you select the lamp as well. G, move it. Yeah, I did. So I have both of them selected. I'll scale it down and then I'll place it close to the camera. So I'll move it over here. Just press G to move it. Scale it down a little bit and bring it up and then kind of rotate it this way and drag it down. Let's see how this looks. Shift Z. There we go. We can see the pumpkin just like that. Also, another thing that I forgot to do is to change the stem color to a brown sort of color. So we'll right click on this, go over to the material tab, click the plus button and then the new. Change it to a brown color, probably around here, and drag this down a little bit less. So if you want the hex code for that, it's right there, 423528. Go into edit mode, Alt right click on this, Shift Alt right click, then box select the top and click assign. So now if we press Shift Z, we can see it right there. We need to do that exact same thing for the pumpkin on this layer. So go to layer 5 and then right click on this, go into edit mode, Alt Shift right click on this one so it selects all of them, click the plus button and then click the drop down menu and select that material and assign. So now if we go back to layer 1, we can see that all of them now have that stem. Perfect. Let's press Shift 2 to bring that one back. There we go, looking good. Alright, so now what we're going to do is add in the lantern that I created. And you can download this lantern in the description, it leads you to a Google Drive where you can download it. So once you've done that, you can press Shift F1, or you can come up to File and Append. Then we can find where our file is at. Mine is on my desktop right here, and Low Poly Lantern. Once you've clicked on that, click on Group and select Low Poly Lantern and Append from Library. And we can see that this lantern is now in our scene. So press Z twice to get out of render view. I'll right click on the empty. This allows us to move it. Because there is multiple objects, you can see right here there's multiple objects. I created an empty to move everything all at once. So I'll scale it down, I'll bring it up, and I'll drag it to where the camera is. So roughly around here, rotate it, scale it down a little bit, go into camera view, and I'll drag it to where the ground is. Let's see how this looks now. There we go, not too bad. Alright, couple more things that we need to do before we render. We need to right click on our plane and give this a material. So I'll just go with a darker, kind of more saturated brown, so probably around here, and I'll drag this down. I think that is good. Let's see how this looks. Shift Z. There we go, not too bad. Now I want to add some low poly grass. So to do this, I'm going to go to a new layer. I'm going to go to layer 4. I'm going to press Shift A. We're going to add in a plane. Next, we're going to model this plane and give some variation. So go into top view, then press period to zoom in on your plane. We'll scale it along the x-axis. So press S, X, and scale it in. Go into edit mode, press Ctrl R, and add in a bunch of loop cuts, probably around 6 or 7. I'll go with 7, so click, and then right click, and that will snap it into place. I'll right click on this edge, I'll go into proportional editing by pressing O, and I'll just drag it up. So it gives it sort of like a curve, just like this. I'll also right click on this top vertex and scale that inwards. There we go, and maybe a little bit more scale, I'll bring that up a little bit. I'll right click on this one, scale that one in. On the X, there we go, that looks good. I'll press Shift D, I'll move it to the side, and then I'll keep doing it. So I'll drag it this way a little bit, give it some curvature, Shift D, maybe this way, and maybe down a little bit, maybe I'll bring that one up. Just giving some variation between the grass strands. Shift D one more time, and I'll drag this one up, and I'll drag that one down. There we go. So now we have a bunch of strands, and what we're going to do is right click on 3 of them. So click new on the material, and I'm going to change it to a green color. So I'll drag it up over this way, not too saturated, probably around here, and then I'll drag it down. So it gives it a nice dark greenish color for the grass. Then hit Ctrl L and go materials. So all 3 of these have that same material. For this one, I'm going to give it a different color. I'm going to click new, and I'm going to give it like a tannish, kind of a dead grass sort of look, probably around there. Let's press Shift Z, see how that looks. A little bit darker and a little bit more green, I think. Probably there is good. All right, so once you've done that, box select all of them and hit Ctrl G. We'll call this group grass. Next, go over to the layer 1, right click on your plane and give it a new particle system. So go over to this tab, click on the plus button, change it from emitter to hair. Check advanced and scroll down to the group section right here underneath the render panel and select the group that we just made, which is low poly grass. There we go. We also want to make sure the density has that same group that we created for the pumpkin. So all of the particles will be in the middle. Let's see how this looks. I'll zoom in here. Not too bad. Let's press Shift Z. There we go. Let's actually create a lot more of this. So for the number of particles, I'm going to set this to 10,000. We'll see how that looks. Shift Z. Still think it needs a little bit more. So what I'll do is I'll set the number to around 50,000. Shift Z, we'll see how that looks. There we go, that's a little bit better. And another thing that I'm going to do is turn on rotation. I'll check on rotation and I'll set it to global Z. And then we want to turn up the phase. This will rotate it along the Z axis. So bring the phase up to 5. So all of them are facing, actually no, wait, 0.5, I mean, not 5, 0.5. So now all the particles are now facing the camera. So let's press Shift Z, we can see it look like that. Not too bad. Another thing I want to do is turn up the random size. So some particles will be a little bit bigger and some won't be. So probably around there. And I'll turn the overall size down just a tad. Let's press Shift Z, see how this looks. And there we go. Also on the phase, I'll give this a little bit of random, so some of them are rotated the other way. Shift Z. There we go. So we have some variation all over. That is looking great. Let's bring back layer 2 and Shift Z one more time. There we go. Nice. So now for the world settings, I'm going to go over here, click Use Nodes, and I'm going to set it to the sky texture right here. We can just leave it on the default settings. We'll press Shift Z. Everything is looking very, very bright. So I'll turn the strength down till it's about like a 0.5 maybe. There we go. A little bit darker actually. Let's go like 0.3. Another thing that I want to do is press Shift A. I'm going to add in a lamp and point lamp. Also, the scene is very laggy, so I'm going to come over to the particle system. Under the display tab, I'm going to turn this to a value of 10. There we go. Now I can move around the scene a lot easier. So for this lamp, I'm going to position it right above this lantern right here and bring it up. Because currently what's inside the lantern is just a mesh. If I zoom in here, we can see it a little bit better. This mesh right here, which is emitting light, but I want it to be a little bit brighter. And I don't want it to like completely blow out the scene, so I'm using a lamp. So let's see how this looks now with this lamp right here. We can see it's looking quite a lot better, but it's a little bit bright. So I'll bring the strength down to 40. There we go. And for the color, I'll just give it a little bit of an orangish color. Not too much, probably around there is good. There we go. One last thing that we need to do before we render is right click on our camera and give it some depth of field. So I want it to focus on this pumpkin right here. So I'm going to select the focus and icosphere right here. Let's just make sure that's what it's called. Yep, icosphere without any numbers and icosphere right there. I'm going to turn on f-stop, so change it to f-stop. And then for this number, I'll set it to 2. We'll see how this looks. Shift Z. There we go. We can see it just like that. I think that's good. It blurs out the background a little bit and it focuses on this. Perfect. Okay, so let's go to the render layers panel and check on denoising. This will help make our scene look a lot better without too many samples. For the resolution, I'm going to turn it all the way up. In the sampling, I'm going to set this value to 400. Because currently, if I press Shift Z, we can see there is a lot of noise. And if I do the denoising function without setting a lot of samples, it will look very weird and it's just it's going to blur out the scene and it's not going to look that great. So make sure you have a very high sample number and with the denoising on. I'm also going to set the clamp indirect to 1, and then I'm going to turn off reflective and refractive caustics. Alright, so once you've done that, hit Control S, I'll save it to right here. I'll just call it Pumpkin Patch and enter, and then click on Render. Alright, so this should not take too long. I'm running on my GPU right now. It looks like it's a value of like 4 minutes or so, so I'll pause the video until it's done. Okay, the render has finished and that is looking pretty good. Another thing I noticed though is what I would do to change this is I'll just rotate this camera probably down just a little bit so I can get more of the frame and not so much of the sky. So if I press Shift Z, we can see that looks a little bit better, but I'm not going to worry about that. For this, I'm going to go into the compositing. So click on this button and check on compositing, click on use nodes and backdrop. For this, I'm just going to add a little bit of color grading and then a little bit of glare and stuff like that. It's not too much, but I think it will add a lot to the scene. So press Shift A, we're going to go to filter and glare. Plug that in right here. Also hit Control Shift left click on this glare node and that will add a viewer node to the scene so we can actually see it. Press V a couple times to bring everything into focus. And for this, I'm going to change it to fog glow. That gives it a nice effect right there. And let's see how this looks with a mix of 1. I might bring up the threshold just a little bit. Maybe down a little bit. No, probably there. Let's bring the mix back to 0. And there we go. We can see the glow really adds to it. Next, I'm going to move these out of the way. I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to color and then, where is it at? Color balance. We'll plug that in between this. I'll bring it into the compositing. And for this, I'm going to drag the lift down over to this color, probably just around there. This is the shadows, this is the midtones, and then this is the highlights. So I'll drag the highlights up just a tad. And for the color of everything, of the midtones, I'll give it a yellowish color, just a tad. Let's see what happens if we go over to the blue for the shadows. Alright, I think that actually looks just a little bit better. Not too much though, that was a little much, so I'll drag it down probably around there. One more thing that I'm going to add is a vignette, because you guys know that I really like my vignettes. So let's go to Filter, Blur, then we'll add in a lens distortion. So go to Distort, and then Lens Distortion. We'll plug this into here, change the distort value to 1, change it to Fast, and then click on Relative, and change both of these to about 20%. Then press Shift A, we're going to go to Color, and then Mix. Plug it right here and take the blur output and plug it into the bottom input of this mix node. So right there, we'll change it to multiply so it gets rid of the white, and I'll plug it into the composite. Now this factor controls how strong the vignette is. And right now it's really strong, so I'll drag it down to a value of like 0.6. So let's check a before and after. So here's before, and then here's after the effects. And we can see it does look quite a bit better. We can see the glow over here, the colors are a lot better, and I think it looks really nice. So let's go back to the default and then click on Viewer Node. Alright, there we go. That is going to be it for this tutorial. Thank you for watching. Also, another thing that I want to add is my new course on the particle system just came out and it is on Udemy. Link is down in the description. In this course, we talk about the particle system and we go through the settings and how everything works. And then in the later sections, we create full scenes in Blender, such as like grass, fluid particles, hair, and a low poly smoke. So if you would like to learn more about the particle system, go check it out. Link is down in the description again. So that is going to be it for this tutorial. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, and I'll see you guys in the next one.